Hello everyone, it's Daryl here. Thank you for downloading the Total Soccer Show. We have no Taylor Rockwell today. He has a family matter to attend to. Filling in for Taylor, we have the one and only Matt Doyle. Matt Doyle of MLSsoccer.com. If you're a long-time listener to TSS, you'll know Matt is one of our favourite people to talk US men's national team with. He has a sharp tactical eye and he's really good at sort of expressing those concepts and making it easy to understand. So Matt carved out 30 minutes between watching MLS preseason games, I'm not joking, that's what he was doing, to talk US-Serbia and some of the things that he saw, and also to look ahead to the US-Jamaica game on Friday. Okay, before we hear that interview, I want to let you know that today's show is sponsored by SeatGeek. With Taylor not here, I'm being very careful about how I pronounce it. Make sure I pronounce it correctly. SeatGeek. SeatGeek has made the ticket buying process easier than ever. They have simplified the whole process. SeatGeek even does all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring you get the best possible deal. I like to open up the app, have a search around, see what's worth seeing. And what I see right now is the US men's national team against Jamaica on Friday in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Tickets are around $30, $40 on the SeatGeek app right now. But here's the best part. You can get $20 off that price if you make a purchase via the SeatGeek app. Here's how you do it. First, you download the SeatGeek app. You go to the settings tab, click add a promo code. Enter the promo code TSS, stands for Total Soccer Show, TSS. Then SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. So download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code TSS today, especially if you live within driving distance of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's episode. Now there's going to be drum clicks and some music, and then we're going to talk US men's national team with Matt Doyle. Matt Doyle, thank you for joining me once again on the Total Soccer Show. How you doing?
Yeah, good, man. How you doing?
Pretty good. We always say to people, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And I want to say doubly so to you because you've come on the show at short notice. You were just watching the preseason friendly between, I believe it was Red Bulls and Real Salt Lake.
That's right.
So you were deep in some preseason soccer.
Yes, yeah. Some very, very early preseason soccer, and this game had all the hallmarks of that. A lot of sloppy touches, a lot of weird shape from both teams, and not much enjoyment to be had. But watching soccer, even bad preseason soccer, is better than just about anything else going on in the world these days. So I'll take it.
That gives us a nice little segue into US national team, the 0-0 draw with Serbia, the January friendly. I'm not sure if you listened to the show we did, our review show, but we ended up being more positive on second viewing, and that a lot of people kind of disagreed with us because it was a 0-0 draw with Serbia. So I guess my first question to you before we get sort of into the weeds is the fact that it's January a good enough excuse for not beating Serbia's domestic team?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same like when we didn't beat Canada a few years ago, and when we didn't, when we lost 3-2 to the Chilean C team. I don't think anybody was, killing Jurgen about the results. It's
right.
About the process. It's always got to be about the process. And if you can't explain what you're doing as a process, you know nothing about what you're doing. And I think for me, there was some encouraging data from this one because I thought the process was at least explicable.
So if you're writing down those data points, what would they be?
Getting the central midfield balance sort of squared away. Michael Bradley was unquestionably a number 6 in this one. I think there was some clarity from the back line in terms of when do we stay, when do we go, and the balance from Birnbaum and Marshall was good. There were a couple of plays that Marshall should have made, it didn't, but I could chalk that up to rust. Yeah. So I think those were the two big ones, and then Darlington Nagbe didn't score, but he actually was I think more dangerous in his movement than than I expected to see. He got behind the defense three times, I think. And that's not something he usually does. And I wanted to see that from him. And hopefully goals follow, or assists at least. But there was, it looked like they knew what they were supposed to do, and the execution was not necessarily there, but the thought process behind it was.
I saw you put a video up on MLSsoccer.com about the idea of goal-scoring wingers, and maybe for the sort of the shape that Bruce Arena sent out to work, we need maybe more goal-scoring wingers. And like Nagbe was nearly there, but wasn't quite there. I wondered if you kind of could you explain that to people who maybe haven't seen that video and maybe elaborate on it a little?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally the U.S. Has played best in a 4-4-2, and that was especially true back in the day when Bruce was the coach. And traditionally, Jozy Altidore has been at his best when he's playing with a forward partner.
Yeah.
And one of the few silver linings of 2016, which was just a miserable year in U.S. soccer, was that Jozy and Bobby Wood showed some real chemistry up top together the few times they played together in a 4-4-2, including the goal against Mexico, which was a very nice goal.
Yeah.
I thought going into this camp we would see a 4-4-2, some version of it. The midfield balance may be a little bit different with Jozy and Jordan Morris. Jordan Morris there not to necessarily take Bobby Wood's job, but to approximate what Wood brings to the table.
Yeah.
Because I think they're pretty similar players. The fact that we instead played what was pretty clearly a 4-1-4-1 leaves me scratching my head a little bit. And look, it's Bruce's first camp and it's his first friendly, and it's his call to make, and fine. But if you're going to play a 4-1-4-1, you need to get goal scoring out of your wingers. You need to get goal scoring out of your wide guys, and maybe from one of those central midfielders. And that means Darlington Nagbe coming in from, inverted on the left. That means Alejandro Bedoya, who was not goal dangerous really, playing on the right. That means one of Sasha Kleshtin or Jermaine Jones bursting out of central midfield. It means a different sort of partnership for each of those guys running off of Altidore. And it's kind of a different mindset. And I was surprised to see it because of that. Because if you're going to play a 4-4-2, it's all about getting that partnership between the two forwards correct. If you're going to play a 4-1-4-1, it's a very different sort of metric or rubric you're using to figure out if you're playing well.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that either from the start or one of the changes would be Jordan Morris coming on as one of those wide guys. I really was hoping to see Morris replace Alejandro Bedoya sort of in the second half, which I would have seen as Bruce shifting up to fifth gear or sixth gear, you know what I'm saying? Adding extra pace on that right wing. And I think instead we got Chris Pontius on the right, who I don't think was particularly impressive, and also doesn't add any of that pace to that one wing. I'm thinking of pace as a goal threat as much as anything in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that team needed runners to aim at in both halves, and they didn't really have that until I think Morris came on. I think that there was a lack of direct line speed in the first 11, especially. Part of that might have been by design. Trying Graham Zusi out as a right back, you want to give him a veteran to play behind at right midfield. I don't love that. I would have rather seen Darlington Nagbe on the right side of that 4-1-4-1 with Morris inverted on the left. Which I think is kind of, if you're going to play him kind of as a winger, I think that's his most natural spot. So there's a lot of stuff at play, but you're absolutely right that the lack of speed was an issue for the U.S. and Serbia was able to take advantage a little bit by making the game a little bit ugly.
So are we seeing sort of the first signs of the things we might be frustrated by in Bruce Arena's second tenure? If we start seeing formations that have a solo striker and not too much pace on the wings, we're going to start being a bit frustrated by that.
I think so, if that's what Bruce does. But I think that we're probably whistling a different tune if it's DeAndre Yedlin starting at right back, and Fabian Johnson starting at either left back or one of the wings, and Christian Pulisic starting on one of the wings as well.
That does change things.
Yeah, suddenly you have a lot more speed and a lot more incisiveness, and better passers. And in Pulisic, a guy who I think is going to be a legitimately great finisher from the wing. But look, it worries me. I do. We don't have Landon Donovan to come, or Clint Dempsey to come in and save us in must-win games, and we don't have. I think Pulisic could be better than either of them. But he's 18,
right?
And he's and we're gonna trot him out there against Honduras in March and say, oh, please score these huge goals, and that's a big ask for any 18-year-old, even one as great as Pulisic is.
So I think I saw on MLSsoccer.com that Clint Dempsey has been ruled out of the Honduras game. Right? Seattle have said he's not going to be available to play in that qualifier. It was
a report by Taylor Twellman on the pregame for the ESPN broadcast. See, I mean, they say the broadcast is at 1, and then they kick off at 1:20, and everybody grumbles. But you got Taylor and Hercules Gomez and a few other guys giving us good information in the pregame. So that's why you should always watch the pregame, folks. So yeah, it was a report from Taylor via Bruce that Clint will not be available for the March qualifiers, and they're hoping that they can have him for the summer. And look, Clint is, slowly making his way back. I hope, and I know that they will all be as careful as possible with him, because a heart issue is it's not a light thing. It's pretty heavy.
You don't mess around with that.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully for the Gold Cup, but it doesn't look like. Look, it's a new generation, and the guys that we do have are going to have to step up and show that they can take the head of steam that the previous generation sort of built up and turn it into something meaningful.
Well, one of the sort of weirdly veteran players now is Josie Altidore, right? 100 caps. Even if Adidas were a day late, congratulating him. What did you make of his performance as essentially a solo striker?
I thought he was pretty honest. I think he definitely, did work in terms of coming back and drawing some dangerous fouls, and his defensive work rate was sort of what we've come to expect over the last 18 months from the grown-up Josie.
Yeah.
And the one time he had a chance to get through the lines, he did. And I thought the weight of the pass from, I think it was Sasha, it was just not quite good enough, which is fine. It's January. You expect that.
That's part of that roughness we talk about in January, right? That normally Sasha Kleston's weighted pass is 100% or close perfect. This one was a little sort of overhit. And if I remember correctly, it sent Josie too far towards the goal line.
Correct. And so it turned into a fairly, a brave but routine save from the Serbian keeper.
Yeah.
But I thought he was not the problem. I thought the problem was that once Serbia were keyed in on him, and sort of reacting to his gravity, the other guys have to be goal dangerous, and most of the other guys weren't. With the exception of Nagby, who was dangerous but not decisive.
What about Sasha Kleston? Because I saw that he's gone back to New York, I believe, because his wife is expecting. So it seems to me that's mostly the reason he's left camp and won't be playing against Jamaica. But then it also means that there's more weight on his performance against Serbia in terms of like weighing whether or not he starts against Honduras. And I saw some great moments, some nice little passes, but also some moments like that overhit pass. I know Bruce likes him, but where do we stand with Sasha now? Because I was all excited about him maybe in September or so, and now I'm a little bit more hesitant the way that he wasn't quite able to unlock that Serbian defense.
Yeah, I mean, look, Sasha's not a guy who hasn't had chances in the past. He's had 50-odd caps, I believe. And
right.
What I saw of him against Serbia was the Sasha that we've seen for the last 10 years. He's a guy with really superb ideas in the attacking third. I mean, he sees the game differently than just about anybody. But he's also he's not always as clinical with that ball as he needs to be. And I think that's part of why he's been so good with the Red Bulls, is because the high pressure, the system that Jesse Marsch uses, is based upon creating a million chances, because they will try to turn you over every single time. And that means Sasha gets on the ball. I mean, there's, in terms of work rate and centrality and usage rate from a number 10, I believe he is probably number 1 in the metrics for all of the above in MLS. So I think that in the international game, he's playing for the U.S., who's not going to have as much of the ball, and they're certainly not going to press as high. It's maybe weighted against what Sasha does a little bit more, and so those moments where he doesn't weight a pass perfectly kind of stand out. And to that end, I thought that Benny Feilhaber actually showed better in his 15 minutes than Sasha did.
Are we essentially looking at sort of a Benny versus Sasha, who can impress the most, maybe then start against Honduras?
Feels like it.
Yeah.
And this is something I said on Extra Time Radio yesterday. It's a freaking bummer, because they're both in their early 30s and they've both been really good for a long time. And this is something that we should have had sorted out by, 2011 or 2012 at the latest. And here we are in 2017, asking the same questions over and over again. And it does feel like we lost a half decade there.
I also want to ask you about Graham Zusi, because I was kind of somewhat impressed by his performance at right back, but even though he did nothing wrong and did quite a few things right, I still don't feel fully comfortable. I can't put my finger on why. And I wonder if you have any ideas about why I might be feeling hesitant, despite having no hard evidence as to why.
Because he was hesitant.
Is that what,
in the modern game, you play 4 at the back, you need to get one of those guys up on the overlap. And Zusi was, I thought, indecisive for not necessarily even the overlap, but even when to step up in support of the team in possession. So there were a lot of times where the U.S. didn't necessarily have outlets that they needed to have. And that hurts. That hurts your shape. And look, this is not an unusual thing for a guy learning the position. The good news is that I think he is at best third on the depth chart at that spot. And giving him a run out in this camp actually makes a lot of sense, because if you look at the way the U.S. has played in Central America over the last 5 years, we've generally looked scared. And you need the veterans to come in there and not play scared. I mean, certainly Timmy Chandler was scared in Costa Rica, and even John Brooks was scared in that game. And you need guys who have a little bit more fortitude. And Graham Zusi has shown that he has that. It's not where I thought we'd be as a program, but it's something that Bruce has definitely had to take into consideration.
Another guy that caught my eye was Sebastian Lletget, and I think it seems like he's caught Bruce Arena's eye. He sort of did, I want to say, a pretty good impersonation of Jermaine Jones in the second half.
I thought he was really good in a lot. I mean, it was sort of a Jermaine Jones impersonation in that he did a lot of good things, and then he had a couple of really bad turnovers that put his team in a bad situation.
Right.
He doesn't have the game-breaking athleticism that Jones has, which is something that you always have to account for if you're up against him. It's not. I mean, I think Lletget is a very good athlete for central midfield, and I think he's better on the ball than Jermaine. But that's something that teams, every manager over the last 6-7 years now with the U.S. has found it impossible to ignore just how game-breaking Jones can be with his ability to get out and run. The thing that Lletget does better than Jones is he actually pays attention to team structure and shape, which I think is actually a reason why the U.S. maybe looked a little bit more cohesive in that second half with Lletget on the field, and a couple of touches he had to send guys through or just put his wingers into good spots I thought were really, really nice, and I hope we see more of them at that position.
Yeah, so looking ahead to Friday, the Jamaica game in Chattanooga, Jermaine Jones has also gone back to the LA Galaxy. Sasha's gone back to New York Red Bulls. So we only have 21 players on the roster, as I see it. Do you envision Bruce Arena sending out a very similar formation, just with some different guys in there? And please say yes, because that's what I'm really hoping for, is some consistency of shape and style.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I hope what we see is Leggett starting in the spot where Jones started, and Villafaña instead of Garza, because I thought Villafaña was much better.
Yeah.
And then Nagbe instead of inverted on the left, I want to see him playing on the right, and then Morris inverted on the left. So I hope it is the 4-1-4-1 again, and I hope that I hope we score some goals. We need to. I'm less concerned about the defense than I was after we shipped 4 goals at Costa Rica, but we need somebody to score, because Landon Donovan's not walking into that room and walking through that door, and Clint Dempsey's not walking through that door, and it's this generation's time to show that they can manage these big games without those 2 players.
Do you have time for a listener question, Matt, about formations?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I think I have an answer to this, but I also think it's an interesting question. It's from Adam Ulrich. He says that when US Soccer tweeted out the graphic before the game for the lineup, they said 4-2-3-1, right? And then he said, when Taylor and I talked about it on the show, and we talked about Bradley as the number 6, it was essentially a 4-1-4-1, which is what you just called it, right, when we talked about it. And when Josie, apparently, I'm not sure where this interview is from, but Adam says that Josie talked about it as a 4-3-3. So Adam is saying, what formation did the US actually play against Serbia? And do professional players sort of know the formation, or do they see the formation in the same way that we talk about it when we give it those numbers, or is it a lot more fluid?
It's a lot more fluid, and I think that the difference between the 4-1-4-1 and the 4-3-3 is kind of in the eye of the beholder. Right. To me, the fact that the wingers were so wide, and that both central midfielders in the more advanced positions were liable to get into the attack, made it more of a 4-1-4-1. Calling it a 4-2-3-1, not really. Just because if you do that, you're playing with a double pivot, with 2 deep lying midfielders who kind of share responsibilities. And while there was some of that between Jones and Bradley, it was only some. It was maybe 85-15 to Bradley in terms of shielding that back line.
Yeah, you very rarely saw them sort of parallel to each other, right?
Exactly. And the other thing to understand is that coaches and players tend to sort of roll their eyes at and hate this crap. Referring to formations is shorthand for fans and journalists and players and watchers of the game. But players and coaches get very specific with roles on the field, and they don't say, hey guys, we're going to line up in a 4-3-3. Everybody knows their job, right? And it's like, no, good coaches actually talk about stuff, zones on the field and intent when you have the ball and pressing triggers and stuff like that. And that is much more granular and much more important than saying, oh, we're going to line up in a 4-3-3. Because if you line up in a 4-3-3, you could be a low block. Montreal Impact, they played a 4-3-3 last year and it was all counterattacking. Sporting KC played a 4-3-3 and it was all high pressure front foot soccer. So it doesn't actually mean all that much unless you're really explaining what the roles of individual players and partnerships are.
And I guess the problem is that the guys on TV can't give that information because they don't know specifically what each player's been told. All they can do is give like the rough approximation. And then right. I think maybe if you're watching on TV, if you haven't watched as much soccer, maybe you can look at it and be like, oh, that's the shape. They're expected to hold this exact shape the whole time and move up and down the field like in formation like this, right? And it's not like a North Korean army marching up and down like that.
Right. No, it does give you a fair idea of zones and responsibility, especially once you see, okay, this is where they're drawing their line of confrontation, and this is what the other team is playing. So it gives you an idea of where the gaps are going to be and how much possession they want to hold and stuff like that. So it's not useless. It's just not the it's not as hugely decisive descriptor in the way that a lot of people kind of think it is.
Maybe the way to do it is to think about the players that you see there, and then what you know about Jermaine Jones is that he's going to get up and down. So if you see him listed in a 4-2-3-1, maybe just assume that he's not going to sit in that too. He is going to roam around a bit.
I think that's a fair assumption with Jermaine Jones, for sure.
Final question. So the game is on Friday against Jamaica. I'm always interested in sort of how you guys work it. Will you be, for example, doing a column after that game for MLSsoccer.com? Or is it kind of like Friday night, you should get the night off?
Oh, I don't get nights off. When the U.S. play, I have a column to write, and so I'll do a pregame video. Look, if this was a qualifier, if this was a game that actually mattered, I would do a preview column and a preview video, and then a postgame column and a postgame video. Because it's a friendly, I'm not going to do a tactical preview of this game. Not a column anyway. I'll do a video of things to watch, and then after the game, there will be a preview, or sorry, post-game tactical analysis column and a post-game tactical analysis video, and I'm sure I'll tweet some snarky stuff on Twitter, and maybe I'll go on Reddit and flame a couple of 12-year-olds as well, because why stop, so yeah.
I feel like the last two things are not specifically in your contract, right? That's more just something else you take on.
You'd be surprised. No.
All right, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I look forward to watching and reading your work on Friday.
You got it, my friend. Take care.